What's up, folks? This is Justin from Books, Bricks, and Boards. Today I have something very special planned for you, because today I'm going to be talking about the first RPG I ever played, and it's going to be the first video in a series. I'm going to be talking about the BECMI Red Box. This is one of the few games where I got to spend substantial time as a player before I attained Forever DM status. So without further ado, here is Building with BECMI Part 1, The Red Box. If you like what you see here today, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. The performance of this video will play a part in how quickly I get to the other entries in the BECMI line. I currently plan to do videos on every one of the 5 core boxes, as well as a separate video on the Rules Cyclopedia. That said, if these do well, I may also expand to some of my favorite products in the line. As on my shelf, I have the Champions of Mystara box, the Hollow World box, Dawn of the Emperors, and the Creature Crucible series, as well as others. If you want to further discuss this or any other retro RPG goodness, head on over to the Books, Bricks, and Boards Discord channel to meet the greatest group of gamers.
I think they're talking about us.
This side of the known world. Link in the description. History of the Red Box. In 1977, TSR decided that they needed an introductory game set. Remember, this is prior to the term RPG becoming part of the common lexicon. People didn't know what these games were, and even less about how to play them. If you weren't lucky enough to have someone to show you the ropes, learning to play the earliest editions of the game we love could be quite difficult. Remember, no Google to crowdsource your questions back then. In the process of building this introductory set, TSR hit pay dirt with the enlistment of Dr. John Eric Holmes, who was an avid player and showed a great talent for compiling, presenting, and when necessary, revising the existing white box rules. Released in 1977, the Holmes basic set covered levels 1 through 3 and stayed fairly close to the original game source material, though it did become much more playable for novice gamers due to the clarification and the compilation of the rules in a much more digestible format. Holmes Basic, with its beautiful blue box, contained the rules booklet, some dice with a crayon to color in the numbers, as well as the excellent Mike Carr adventure In Search of the Unknown. The Holmes edition was designed from the start to feed players into the forthcoming Advanced Dungeons & Dragons game and made no allusions to the idea that it was a full game of its own. In 1981, based upon the strong sales of the Holmes basic set, TSR went about creating a revised basic set that would, with expansions, continue beyond level 3 and offer a different, more streamlined experience as compared to AD&D.
TSR Hobbies, Dungeons & Dragons games, products of your imagination.
This was the Tom Moldvay Basic Set, or the Magenta Box, which was released alongside a Dave Cook Expert Set to create a new line of Dungeons & Dragons. The Moldvay Basic Set kept the focus on levels 1 through 3 and fully established the Races class format that would act as a marker for all further basic Dungeons & Dragons. The game was still similar enough to Holmes to be playable together, but there was a clear shift towards something different and not as subservient to the now aging white box rules. Inside the box of the Moldvay edition, you would find a 64-page rulebook covering everything you would need to know as a player or DM, dice with the same aforementioned crayon, and another great adventure in the iconic Keep on the Borderlands. The rulebook did reference that further levels would be covered in the Cook Expert Set, which would cover to 14th level, and there were references to a companion set covering additional levels and abilities, but that companion set never materialized for this edition of the game. Because Moldvay Cook D&D stopped at 14th level, commonly viewed as the high end of the best levels of D&D play, it is often viewed as a complete product line, even though it was planned with more products in mind. And that brings us to the subject of our video today, the 1983 Frank Mentzer Basic Set, commonly referred to as the Red Box.
Unleash the power of your imagination.
With that legendary Elmore art of the dude fighting the dragon on the cover, this box is the genesis of the BECMI line. And while it certainly owes much to its predecessors, BECMI is indeed its own beast with its own following. Is BECMI still relevant today? What with all of the various alternatives and retro clones available? I set out to answer that question myself with my two sons a couple of months ago. We switched from AD&D to BECMI, and I have to say I have been very impressed with the BECMI boxes as building blocks to a fully realized and fulfilling RPG line. What's in the box? As you would open a red box in 1983, you would find a 64-page player's manual, a 48-page Dungeon Master's rulebook, dice, and probably an invite to join the RPGA. Of note, there was not a separate book with an adventure, though both players' and DM's book had their own adventures inside. This change in format was more than acceptable, in my humble opinion, as they were able to clearly speak directly to their audiences with a distinct tone for the players and a separate tone for the DMs. But more on that later as we dive deeper into these books individually. The player's book, after a very brief introduction to what an RPG is, dives right into a solo quest which introduces the basic mechanics of the game while scarring us for life with the tragic death of Alina. Following, the book covers the creation of all manner of heroes, including fighters, magic users, clerics, thieves, dwarves, halflings, and elves. This edition stuck with the race's class characters as established in the Mulvey game, and they are clearly rooted in the tropes of Tolkien fantasy literature. The player's book has a small selection of gear and spells up to 2nd level for magic users and 1st level for clerics, because in this edition, clerics didn't cast spells until they hit 2nd level. There are several pages of charts and tables in the center of the book which make finding individual rules fairly easy once you're vaguely familiar with the game. There is throughout the book a particular focus on keeping the information relayed proximal to the folks consuming it. If you are playing a cleric, for example, all of your rules, advancement charts, saving throws, and spells are right there together. The same is true for each class in this book. No flipping endlessly to find the information you need. It is right in one spot. That, combined with the earlier mentioned tables found in the center of the book, makes this work both as a reference tool and a learning tool. The book says, read this first right on the cover, and for good reason, as it really covers A to Z what it is to be a player in a role-playing game. It feels like an anachronism, as in current board game products, you will often get a learn-to-play book which will state to read this first. This style of information delivery is really a step ahead of the rest of gaming in 1983. There are many other tips and suggestions for new players throughout the book, including topics as varied as remembering your character isn't you, hey, it's the 80s, to finding other people to play with. Remember, the hobby was still young and the world was much larger without the proliferation of information available on the internet now. Most of all, the player's manual does a great job of introducing concepts and mechanics in a way that is inviting without being condescending. The learning through play of the included solo adventure in particular is a great example of teaching a game through play. That covers a lot of content, but that was only the player's manual. Whereas previous basic sets had placed the player's and DM's information in the same book, Mentzer took a decidedly different approach. By splitting the two books, he was able to talk directly to the players in the player book and directly to the DM in the DM's book. This is pretty similar to the tack that Gary had taken with his advanced books, and it keeps the Dungeon Master side of the screen a bit more mysterious to the players. I know for my part, before I was able to buy my own copy, the unknown of what was in store for me was a large part of the draw. When I finally did get my own copy of the Red Box, I found a veritable feast of advice, details, and procedures to fuel an aspiring Dungeon Master. I'm going to probably have a pretty unpopular opinion here, but for the levels that it covers, this is probably the best new DM resource ever created, full stop. The DM's rulebook does a great job holding a new DM's hand and guiding them through the progress of effectively adjudicating a game. When do you let bad choices kill a player? How much should you lead a group towards the best answer? How much should you reward clever ideas that are not fully covered in the rules? These types of situations are all explored in the DM's rulebook. Very much mimicking the way that players were spoon-fed the way they would play the game in the solo adventure, DMs are similarly guided with the included dungeon in the DM's rulebook. The first level of the dungeon is very defined and guided. The second level is something of an empty vessel with tools to fill it up. The third level is completely left to your imagination, albeit with some seeds planted to help grow future adventures. This style of building upon concepts through play is a mirror of the player's book, and it is brilliant. It is also a technique that we will see revisited throughout the BECMI line to rule out new mechanics or ideas and insert them seamlessly to your existing campaigns. Apart from the tutorial dungeon, there are several pages that finish out concepts began in the player's manual, providing the DM's perspective upon things that the players initiate, such as the behind-the-scenes impact of spells or turning undead, and just how it plays out in specific situations. This separation of information helps to build that mysterious unknown element that should draw in the players. There are also 15 pages of monsters to fight, with a mix of the mundane like bears to the marvelous like young dragons. Curiously, there are separate entries for human, bandit, berserker, normal man, and NPC party, which says something about the common foes you will be going up against in your red box levels of play. Oh, you will get to fight an occasional werewolf, but far more often you will be hunting the bandits and bargles of the world. There are only 6 pages of treasure in the red box, but that made generating a white dragon's horde no less exciting for my boys, or for me as the DM either. The DM's rulebook finishes with a page of charts covering saves to hits and wandering monster tables, all in one spot for easy reference at the table. Not to get up on a soapbox here, but modern designers could really glean quite a lot from this edition for teaching their products, as Mentzer more than 40 years ago had already mastered the subject. And that pretty well covers what's in the red box. One thing that I found interesting was the hint of a skill system in the DM's manual on page 20, offering ability checks by either rolling a d20 or a variable amount of d6s. As per most TR skill systems, this is a roll under in both cases, but the idea that you could use 3d6 for a normal activity, but 4 or 5 for a more difficult task is in some very real ways a clear predecessor to the popular advantage mechanic of modern D&D. So for example, bursting through a common stuck door might require 3d6 compared to your strength. Bending prison bars could be 4 or 5d6 to accomplish. Mentzer threw this concept in as an example of creating things not covered by the rules, and in doing so he established an early form of one of the most popular mechanics of RPGs in the last 20 years. Amazing. Building BECK. Throughout this series of videos, I will be sharing the exploits of a particularly dashing young fighter named BECK. BECK's stats were generated using 3d6 down the line, and as such, he started with the following attribute numbers: Strength 14, Intelligence 11, Wisdom 10, Dexterity 10, Constitution 13, and Charisma 11. These are actually quite good for his era and reflect the perfect stats for a new adventurous young fighter.
Who wants some?
Because his DM used the optional max hit points at first level, found in the DM's rulebook, BECK has 9 hit points total, with 8 from his hit die and 1 from his exceptional constitution. BECK's starting gold was determined with 3d6 times 10, giving him a paltry 80 gold to spend on equipment. That being the case, he won't be able to pick up that plate mail armor he's been eyeing in the blacksmith shop, at least not until he has gained some treasure. Instead, he buys some reliable old chainmail, a sword, a shield, a backpack, a tinderbox, 6 torches, a water skin, 50 foot of rope, a 10-foot wooden pole, a flask of oil, and then spends his final 5 gold pieces on some standard rations. He will have to work to acquire anything else that he wants. BECK's Red Box Adventures. During his Red Box days, BECK found that strength in numbers was the key to a long career, which was still by no means guaranteed or even likely. That said, he joined a group of hungry and experienced adventurers to plunder local dungeons and make their fortunes. Along the way, they fought a variety of bandits, kobolds, goblins, and even the occasional ogre, but by far their greatest accomplishment was in vanquishing the young white dragon, whom the locals had dubbed Frostmourne. Though they lost their thief in the battle, R.I.P. Shadow, the treasure hoard boasted more gold than any of them had ever seen, and for BECK, it gave him his most prized possession, a sword he calls Wolfsbane. A local sage had told him that the blade was magical and particularly effective against lycanthropes. The group's wizard Lyran found a scroll with a spell that she was as of yet incapable of casting, but she assures the group that with study, she will be able to hurl balls of fire at their enemies soon enough. Thus far, her greatest feat has been in causing enemies to doze off with her potent sleep spell. The cleric in the group also learned how to cast some spells, but only after they had gained some experience and possibly some divine favor. He provided some much-needed healing between battles, but most impressive was the time that he sent a full group of skeletons retreating from the site of his holy deadly symbol. Their thief obviously had it the worst. Besides dying horribly in the initial exchange with Frostmourne, he rarely succeeded at any of his assigned tasks aside from climbing walls. While the group hadn't added any demi-human party members yet, they've heard tales boast of their versatility and, in the case of the dwarves, their durability. So they have not ruled that out as an option just yet. While their time up to this point has almost exclusively been in exploring crypts, caves, and dungeons, BECKS Group has grander plans in mind for the near future and is looking forward to exploring beyond the borderlands and potentially even checking out a certain mysterious island supposedly teeming with treasure and deadly beasts. The good and the bad. First, the good. As a teaching tool, the Red Box is unparalleled. The player and DM focus for the individual books makes learning to play a breeze, and it does it better than any subsequent starter set has done yet. Number 2, the art. Elmore, Easley, and all of the others have great line art that permeate through these books, and it takes you right back to that early 80s classic period of RPG art. Just cracking these books and taking a glance, you will have a great idea of what it felt like to play them back in those halcyon days. And number 3, the solo adventure. You know I am a big proponent for solo role-playing, and the fact that the basic set has its own solo adventure, which is somewhat robust considering the scale of the product itself. I really like this method of teaching. I also really like that it provides the DM a chance to feel, for once, what it's like to be a player. I think it is well done, and even though they did kill off Alina, I think the story matches the tone of the product, and it does what it sets out to. The bad. No keep on the borderland. This is a big omission. I know that this is probably due to the fact that they split the 2 rule books up instead of having just one with everything in it, but losing one of the most iconic adventures from the previous box set is a big downer. That said, there were enough of those printed through the Moldvay days that you will be able to find one relatively easy and cheaply, as I have. Number 2, give me more. Levels 1 to 3 really aren't earth-shattering. There's not a lot of change that you're going to experience during that time, and it really feels like maybe this should have been 1 to 5, or possibly even a little bit more. That said, because there's not a lot of change, Mentzer could focus on just getting across the core rules and not worrying about as much how advancement is going to affect the game, and that's probably okay. Number 3, poor thieves. Thieves in BECMI just suck at everything. They have less than a 25% chance to do pretty much anything outside of climbing during their first 3 levels of play. It doesn't get much better than that for a while, but just surviving with their D4 hit points and their lousy skills while they're being put out in the front of the group often is really a harrowing life to lead. Summary. The Mentzer Basic Box is beloved for good reason. Not only was it many of our first gaming experiences, but in retrospect, it really was ahead of its time in terms of teaching the game in a structured and methodical way. As a young man, I never really appreciated this aspect of the box, as I learned from other players, not the books. But with the benefit of fresh eyes, the Red Box earned its adoration, no question about it. What was your favorite Red Box moment? Was there anything that I failed to mention about the Red Box that you think I should have? Should I have talked about callers and mappers, for example? Are you going to be coming back to watch my videos on the Expert Set, Companion Set, Master Set, Immortal Set, and the Rules Cyclopedia? I look forward to these conversations and more in the comments section, as well as in the Discord. The next video in this series is going to be covering my favorite of the BECMI boxes, the Expert Set. So be prepared to have some hex-crawling goodness when that one releases. Until next time, this has been Justin from Books, Bricks, and Boards. Good gaming, and God bless.